As others will join us throughout this morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to my I'm looking at the thing May 5th, but it's April coffee chat, which is our next to the last coffee chat for my year. We're real excited to have with us managing partners from three of Maryland's large mid-sized firms to talk about what is happening in their firms and how their firms have changed, and really looking forward to the rest of this year and what that may look like, whether with employees working from home, employees coming into the offices, client meetings, things of that nature. But before we jump into that, I just want to remind everyone the last coffee chat will be on May the 5th. That one is the correct date. And we're going to have Chief Judge Morrissey will give the State of the Union of the District Court, Chief Judge Pack from the Office of Administrative Hearings, and Chief Judge Bradar from the U.S. District Court. All three will be providing their insights as to the reopening fully of the courts and what that looks like over the last year. Chief Judge Barbera will be giving the State of the Judiciary at our annual meeting, which is June 9th through the 12th. Registration is open for the Legal Summit and annual meeting. It's 100% virtual. So I encourage you to please register. We have over 85 substantive programs on various areas and tracks of the law. In addition, we have over 65 CLE credit hours, and Andrea Terry, I see, is with us. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but those are credited from other state jurisdictions. So you can really acquire all of your mandatory CLE from the other state jurisdictions at the one annual meeting. Nina Totenberg, we have former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and Lieutenant Governor Rutherford will all be participating in our annual meeting. So that's going to be a lot of fun, June 9th through the 12th. And we have some fun events planned with some cooking and other types of social get-together. So I hope to see everyone at that time. So without further ado, let me introduce to you three individuals who have made a tremendous impact in our profession. They started out about a year ago, right after the pandemic set in. They had an idea to get together and to create a conference call and just have informal discussions about what's happening in their firms and how firms are dealing with it and sharing information with one another. Our three guests this morning are Sharon Kreber-Weisbaum, who's the managing partner at at Brown, Goldstein, and Levy. I was looking at the wrong sheet. She has an active practice and a very forceful advocate for individuals with disabilities and their families who confront barriers in education, employment, housing, and many of the other services. We also have with us Dave Schuster, who's the managing partner at Cremon and Graham. Dave also has an impressive background particularly in litigation as a trial lawyer. And Dave also has a number of civic and nonprofit experience that he is involved in. And we'll hear more from Dave about that. And finally, our third guest is Tom Dane, managing partner at Gulliver, Velius and Jones. And Tom also practices in the firm's health law, and litigation groups. You guys, all of you have tremendous, impressive backgrounds. I didn't go into a lot of detail. You can find out more about them on their websites, but I really wanted to get into the substance of our discussion this morning. So how did this idea come about for the three of you, and then inviting all the other managing partners to participate in the weekly for a while discussion? Who wants to start?
Sharon, do you want to take a step?
What I remember is around March 8th, 9th of 2020, I was getting very concerned about what I was hearing. And I picked up, either I picked up the phone or Tom or Dave picked up the phone, because the three of us had been in touch a lot as managing partners, just sharing information over the years before. And I remember just talking to them and saying, what are you doing to prepare for what I think is coming like next week? And with that, the three of us talked and started realizing that these were some really difficult times ahead, and we had to quickly pivot our firms. And maybe there were other managing partners dealing, or probably we were all dealing. And so I think one of the gentlemen said, let's start calls.
Yeah, that's how I remember. It was March 13th is when our office announced to everybody that we were going to start to work remotely. And in the days leading up to that, people were very uncertain about what was going to happen. And I remember thinking, this will be for 2-3 weeks, something like that, almost like a blizzard. We'll get through it, and then we'll get back to normal pretty quickly. And then our group, this is like, I believe, an example of networking, without social media, the way it was typically done. Tom, Sharon, and I knew each other and were friendly and friends before this. And through their social networks and our social networks, we just started to add people to the calls. And eventually, I think by the end of it, we had virtually every sizable law firm in Maryland on the calls represented. And they were very helpful. And the beginning was, we talked about things as simple as how are we going to collect the mail? How are we going to outfit our support staff with technology to take home? It was really nuts and bolts kind of stuff at the beginning.
How about your firm? I mean, how did your firm kind of initially handle this? I mean, all of you have shown great leadership in directing. I'm sure all your employees are looking to you at what are we going to do, what's happening, and scared.
Yeah, so like Sharon and Dave, I was looking at this with the group of leaders in my firm, trying to figure out what we were going to do, from simple things like Dave just mentioned. How do we get the mail when we're all in our homes and we don't have an office operation anymore, to when are we going to come back and how will we come back? And it was, like every other office in the world, it was unprecedented. And so I did what I thought made sense, which is to reach out to my two friends, Sharon and Dave. And from there, it just really snowballed. Everybody contacted 2 or 3 other people, and we started getting emails from managing partners all over the state asking to join the call. We'd add people every week. We had wonderful participation from the judges, from yourself, Judge Scurti, from Chief Judge Badar of the federal court. We had the law school deans on our calls to give updates about the law schools. We had somebody from the Attorney General's office join. MSBA was very active in those calls. So it was just a great touch point once a week. And we went from logistical issues to financial issues to, as the summer unfolded, to racial equity issues and how to deal in law firms with what was happening in America around the reckoning with racial injustice. So it was a whirlwind year, of course, as we all know, and it was a nice place to just share ideas and support one another.
And you all relied on a lot of health experts too to help kind of give some guidance. So how did that come about?
I remember at one point we brought in Trudy Henson. She was a public health expert at at Maryland. And she talked to us a lot about kind of the disease and the transmission and what best practices at the time would look like. Because there were firms that were still operating, some, so we brought in her. We brought in 2 other consultants that were helping us think through different ways to pivot, from a business standpoint and a health standpoint. And I think so we would spend about a half hour with an expert with Q&As. And another half hour more on kind of local business for every firm.
As far as like the health of your employees and the mental health and overall concerns, did any of you address, and how did you address some of those issues that may arise? I know it's been very difficult for many of the MSBA members. We've had a heightened increase in the number of calls to our lawyer assistance program. We've seen it across the country. It's been devastating in many ways. So tell me sort of what you all did to kind of prepare your folks, your employees, your partners, your associates, your administrative staff. Tom?
So at Gallagher, Judge, I went to a daily messaging on our intranet post, and I would send out some message about what we should be thinking about, focused on, and periodically I would remind people of our employee assistance program so that they would and let people know that we're all suffering to some degree during this pandemic. It's expected and fine for people to reach out for help during this time. We also tried to build some programs around morale and connectivity among people. So we started hosting more Zoom happy hours. We did trivia nights. We had a holiday party at the end of the year on Zoom and delivered food and drinks to everybody in the firm through wherever they were. We've been very focused on trying to keep people as connected as possible, which of course has been difficult.
Dave, how about your firm? Tell us.
Yeah, we did much of the same. I find myself, sort of reflecting on the last year, and we're incredibly lucky. We have such a good group of people, and I'm thinking of the support staff in particular. They really rallied and supported each other. They did this even before the pandemic, but it was very impressive to watch people sort of mobilize on a day's notice. Nobody knew on Friday, March 13th, what life was going to look like, and we made the announcement, and everybody stopped what they were doing on Friday and focused on grabbing supplies and mobilizing over the weekend, so that we were up and running virtually in only a couple days. And then from that point forward, our staff was just incredibly supportive. It was impressive to watch. And things like we had a secretary who since retired, would every morning greet everybody with a picture of the sunrise or her dogs, and everybody just sort of came together in a really special way. And that was a huge part of it, just keeping everybody's spirits up. And I think we did a good job of managing everybody's expectations and letting people know. I hope people felt that we included them in the planning process and what the next several weeks would look like, and that was a big part of it, just keeping people informed and feeling connected to the operations.
I was going to also, I felt like somewhere between a cheerleader, a mother hen, and a business leader. I felt like I was wearing 3 hats this year. We did some anonymous surveys in our office to continue to get the pulse of our folks, both kind of mental health pulse, what they needed logistically, like little things that made a huge difference. Like people were afraid to ask, maybe, I need a chair that I'm more comfortable with. So, I mean, we had one of our gentlemen who works for us who just didn't mind being out and was, thank goodness. So he delivered monitors and chairs and keyboards that are the better keyboards for your hands, and things that just made day-to-day life a little better from a workstation. And even is what I'm actually sending out, maybe another survey on this coming Monday. And I'm still doing it anonymous, but I'm asking questions now about the vaccine and people's plans and how they feel about coming back with people that might not be vaccinated. I'm trying to get a pulse so I can make some decisions over the next month, 2 months, once I know that the vaccine is available to everyone who wants it. I don't think it's not really for us been relevant yet. But so I'm sending that out so I can get a pulse. So that's another piece. And, we did all the fun things that we could think of, but, so many trivia night. I mean, we did all that fun stuff, but, people are zoomed out too.
It's true.
Yeah,
That's true. So Tom?
I was just going to add, with an organization, any organization, you're going to have people who are in very different places and circumstances. And that was certainly true in our firm. We had some people who were dual career couples with 3 young children. One of my partners has 8 children, and they're all in the house while he's trying to work. And then we have people who were all alone, and people who were dealing with loss within their own families, new people who were onboarded at the firm at a time when they had never seen the office before and hadn't met anybody face to face. So it's hard to meet all of the circumstances and needs of everybody in the firm when they're all so different. But like Dave was mentioning about his firm, our people really came together and just supported one another, and we're running at just a higher level of care, concern, support for one another.
So at some point, you all made the decision, we're going to start reopening and having folks come back into the offices, presumably. What were some of the decisions that you made? What went into those decisions, and sort of what's the current status of your firms now? Are you, fully operational back at the office? Are folks still remote, or you have a hybrid? Tell us a little bit about the current status of each of your firms. Sharon?
So our firm is still pretty much remote. With that said, we had a soft, I think in July, a soft opening, meaning we have all our protocols in place, all the rules, all the distancing, all the equipment, all the temperature checks, all the things that you're supposed to do. And so if someone is going into the office because they just feel like they can't work at home right now, or they want to do a deposition in the conference room, they're abiding by all those rules. But I would say for us, we have very few people in the office on any given day. We've always had 1 or 2 that have gone in to help with scanning mail and doing those kind of things. But we're still working. I mean, it's amazing the efficiency and what people have been able to do fully remote. I mean, and partners and people who said they could never work other than in an office are shocked at their own abilities.
Yeah, so at Cramon and Graham, we pretty early on, I forget exactly when, formed a task force of a handful of people to make recommendations and policies relating to how we're going to ease back into the office. And we were lucky because, as Tom mentioned, one of the participants on our managing principals call was it has been Judge Berdar, and Judge Berdar in the federal court had a very good committee that was analyzing the reopening of the courts, and one of the members of his task force was Dr. Jonathan Zentelman, a epidemiologist at Hopkins, who was one of our guest speakers on the Tuesday morning calls. And we Cramon and Graham conferred with Dr. Zentelman, and we did all of the things that Sharon mentioned. We bought dividers, and we outfitted our office with plexiglass and brought in supplies of hand sanitizer and masks and all that stuff. We basically, in a nutshell, as things started to get better, we allowed more and more people to come back into the office. But there's never been a huge number of people that at any one time have come back. And currently we've done the same thing that Sharon just mentioned. We took a survey to to find out what people's plans are for vaccinations. And that's going to help us decide how comfortable as a group we all feel getting back together. And that's the next step in the process. And I feel like finally there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here. And with more and more people becoming vaccinated, it will make things a lot easier for us to do things in person again.
Yeah, Gallagher is a very similar circumstance. We have 3 phases to our return to the office work. The first phase we implemented last summer to allow people who absolutely had to be in the office to work effectively to come back. And we limited the occupancy, and we've had maybe 10 or 15 people a day since last June, end of June. And now we're considering when we will go to phase 2, which is encouraging people to come if they can, but allowing them to stay home if they have health reasons or if they have childcare reasons why they have to stay home. And we're trying to figure out what the right date is for that. And I think it will depend upon the vaccine situation. It'll also depend on the public health circumstance in our community. We're, of course, like everybody else, watching that very closely. And then eventually we'll get to phase 3 where we require people to come back. I don't see that happening until late in the year after schools and childcare is sorted out and the community is much safer.
I recall from one of your calls is that there was a discussion, you had someone actually give some conversation about requiring employees to come, who come back to be vaccinated. And, you know, with issues that surround that regarding religious exemptions and other concerns that folks have, and, you know, protecting their constitutional rights to determine whether they should or can get vaccinated to maintain their employment. So tell me a little bit about sort of how that factors in your thought process as employees start coming back into your office.
Well, that's been kind of rattling through my mind over the last few months because I was working with clients on those questions, not only as a managing partner of my own firm, but helping clients figure that out, nonprofit agencies or businesses. So, you know, you started with the EOC rules that kind of lay out your legal framework for what you're allowed to do. And then you have to kind of start to think about your own culture in the firm, which is why I'm actually doing this survey Monday that I should have results by next week. And I think I first want to know, how big an issue am I dealing with? Like, you know, 95% of my people are going to be vaccinated, which is my guess. It's a much smaller issue to deal with than not. So I'm toying with all of those questions. But I do think it's somewhat of a cultural issue for your own company, your own firm, balancing those different people's interests.
Right. So we have a question in our chat. Did you have to make any adjustments to your staffing, increase or reductions to the number of work hours? Tom?
We did not. We decided early on that we were going to weather this storm without affecting individuals, if we could possibly do that. And we successfully did that. We did reduce our compensation for everybody on a sliding scale. So the more highly compensated people were reduced more than the lower compensated people. But at the end of the year, we were able to restore all of those reductions, and we kept everybody on staff, including people like our receptionists who literally had no job to do. We wanted to keep them all part of the team so that we could stay together. So we were fortunate, and more than fortunate, we had great solidarity among our people to make that happen.
How
about your firm, Dave?
Yeah, you could tell the three of us frequently spoke to each other during this time. We had basically the same approach. We very much wanted to protect the staff for as long as we possibly could, and we were successful in doing that. We also, you know, we had some employment offers that were outstanding that we felt it was important to honor. And so we took on some new people during the, during the pandemic when, there was a lot of hand wringing, still is, about what the larger economy is going to look like. But we felt like, we felt comfortable doing that. We made other adjustments. One of the most important things that I think, just on the financial nuts and bolts of things, it was very difficult to, one of the most difficult things was to handle our billing in a virtual setting. That wasn't easy. And we have it's much easier to, on a monthly basis, print out bills, have attorneys review the bills, mark them up, and finalize them, and then they get mailed to the client. So all of that operation had to be moved to a virtual setting, and that took a lot of planning. But one thing that we really focused on was getting everybody to keep the billing process as tight and as efficient as we possibly could, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep everybody employed and everybody in the firm successful. So that was a big deal for us, and we accomplished that. I'm trying to think of some other things that we did, but yeah, it was. I mean, we really, in the early days of this, nobody knew what life was going to look like, and we were preparing for the absolute worst. And in doing that, it smoothed out our operations in ways that probably needed to be smoothed out. And but again, everybody was in lockstep. Everybody was rowing in the same direction, which was super helpful.
So let me ask this, as far as space is concerned. I mean, now that we've been through a full year, you've got your office space. The old model was you cram as many people into the space as possible in some locations. But are you looking at, how are we utilizing our space? Do we need greater distance and move our cubicles, move our workstations to allow folks to have maintaining the social distancing as they come back to work? And also, I saw today on the news that they had the model where people reserve a workstation and they have a locker where they have their own keyboard and their own mouse, so that they maintain sort of the high touch area surfaces. Tell me a little bit about your thought process as you look forward into this year, 3 years, 5 years, as your leases may expire, what you're going to do with your space and what that's going to look like. Sharon?
Well, I'm laughing because in March 2020, our office was under construction for a new space in the same building on the 25th floor. And because we had grown out of our space, and we also wanted to do more kind of modernized space use, more collaborative space, more workrooms, more uniform office sizes. So we had changed it all up, and we were under construction. And we were halfway through. So the construction stopped. We should have moved last summer. Of course, we didn't. We stopped it. We ended up doing a move January 1st of 2021 upstairs, in beautiful new space, although we're not in our gorgeous new space yet. But I think space is definitely going to be used differently. I think it's going to be a little while. Like when we come back, we'll be in our offices. I'm not sure we'll be tightly using our wonderful new collaborative space yet. That might take some time. I'm hoping we'll get back to that. I also think there's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a changed. I don't think everyone is going to be there 5 days a week anymore. I do think life has changed. People want things built differently, I think. So I see a little more hybrid changes. And so there might be fewer people in an office on any given one day, which helps with the spacing. So I think a lot of things have changed.
How about your firm?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Judge. We actually have two planning groups meeting right now. One is, and they're interrelated. One is looking at what our post-pandemic remote work policy will be, because that will, in some part, determine what our space needs will be. And then we have another group that's looking at what our next lease should be. Our lease will be up in 2 years, so we were starting a process of planning for renewal in our current location or possible relocation to another office. And it's really been completely changed now with what we've learned during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, our remote work policy was that only lawyers, could work up to 3 days per month from another location, from their homes, presumably. And now, of course, we've all been working every day from home, everybody in the firm, not just the lawyers. And we found that the productivity has not suffered. Other things have suffered. It's harder to train people, mentor, make those social connections, of course, advance the culture of the firm. All of that is a casualty of fully remote working, but the productivity has been strong. So people are starting to think differently about, do we all need to be in the office every day? Can we get the mentoring and training and social connections and other cultural aspects of the firm through a few days a week rather than 5 days a week? And then that will determine, can we do something, as you suggested, Judge, and have a hoteling situation where people can reserve an office when they're coming in? I think we'll always have people who will be in the office every day. So some people will have assigned offices, but perhaps others will share offices on alternate days. So all of that's under consideration. It's a really interesting time, as we all know. And for us, it's happening as we were planning to move on our lease decision anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting in many ways because you have the opportunity, you've got a blank slate that you can kind of recreate in some situations. And Sharon, with your firm having been in midway through construction, you said we need to rethink this whole process. Dave, I'm glad you're back. So I know, it's okay. It's never a good Zoom call if somebody doesn't unmute or they kind of hit by mistake. Or in my case, I have internet problems and you freeze and you kind of look like the frozen picture frame. But let me ask this question though, is one of our viewers asked the question about clients. I mean, we've talked internally about the firm culture, your employees, and a lot of focus on really making sure that the health and welfare of your folks has been paramount. But you can't operate without clients. You can't operate without being able to do the work that we've been trained and to do. And many of you have a strong litigation practice. So that includes going to court, which the courts obviously were very reduced. But tell us about how you interacted with your clients and sort of what was the message out there. You've got people working from home and, they couldn't see clients, face to face. How did that happen? Maintaining confidentiality. And I think one of our viewers kind of culminating the question is, can clients now come to your offices and sort of what does that model look like? Dave?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Technology was a huge part of the answer to that. And particularly with respect to client confidentiality, we had to make sure that, all of our home operations had the same security protections that are in office operations. And I think we did that. We have a IT person who was at the time probably working 18 hours a day on this kind of stuff. But the message to the clients was, look, we're operating remotely, but we're still available. We're still business as usual. There were times, and there are times when the clients just have to come on site for either meetings or closings or hearings, virtual hearings, and we made sure that we developed a policy, basically a notice to the client that whenever anybody would plan a meeting with outsiders, outside guests, visitors, they'd have to read our protocols and agree that that's what they would do. And that was never an issue. Everybody, all of our guests agreed to do that. And we, in a conference that might involve 3 or 4 people in a small, tight conference room pre-pandemic was now in our large, boardroom style conference room in order to accommodate people spreading out and putting in the dividers. But I think everybody rolled with it. I was really impressed with everybody's flexibility. It seemed as though, everybody knew that there would have to be adjustments and sacrifices and inconveniences. And people just dealt with it in a very professional way, including our clients. And so it wasn't too difficult of an issue. I mean, I remember there were periods of time, for example, when we would have depositions, and we have 2 conference rooms that are outfitted with video conferencing capabilities. And, the lawyers would prefer to do a lot of this stuff in person. It's just much easier to conduct a deposition in person than it is by video. And we tried our best to accommodate that. And it all seemed to work.
Sharon,
Yeah, it's similar experience, but I would say 90% of our clients had the same reaction, meaning they didn't really want to go out either. So I would bet really the majority of the clients were very happy talking to us daily by Zoom or phone. Then you had, let's say for our firm, a smaller percentage that don't have internet access. They didn't have the luxury of being able to communicate like this. Those clients, we made arrangements that they came in if they wanted to. But again, with all of the protocols in place, and it might be one lawyer, one client, we did plenty of virtual hearings, whether with the courts or the administrative agencies. We did a lot of virtual depositions. We still are. Even if an attorney, I can think of one attorney with small kids at home, when she was taking depositions, she could not do it at home. She just felt like they were going to be in her screen running around. So she would come into the office, but she's the only one there doing a virtual deposition, and everyone else, including her client or the person, the expert, they were virtual as the companies were virtual.
how about Tom, your firm?
Yeah, very similar, Judge, to what Dave and Sharon described. We did almost everything. We've done everything with our clients virtually for the most part. But occasionally we've had clients who need to come to the office. And like Dave described, it just means that they're going to be sitting in a much larger space than it would have sat in 2019 with the same group of people. And we have protocols. We have an online survey that anybody who visits our office or works in our office has to fill out every day about health questions and travel questions, now a vaccine question. And we also have a touchless body temperature scanner at our front door. So anybody who comes in the office needs to have their temperature taken. So those things will be changing over time as the CDC presents more guidance for office spaces, but that's what we've been doing. And it's worked pretty well. Of course, the clients understand that we're in the same circumstance as everybody else in the world. We should be trying to work as much as possible virtually to stay safe.
One of the viewers asked about, meeting with clients face to face and keeping the distance, but under the CDC guidelines, you have someone who says, I'm vaccinated. Do I have to wear a mask? Your employees, they're vaccinated. Do they have to wear a mask while they're in their office? How do you address those issues?
So we've had, like Dave, we have our own Hopkins epidemiologist who we've been consulting with, and she's very clear with me. She says, my advice is probably going to change every 2 weeks because this is an evolving situation. And right now, the advice we're getting is that the CDC and the experts in the field don't know enough yet about the risk with vaccinated people. So the prudent thing to do is to continue to require masks, even among people who are vaccinated. So our policy in our office is that unless you're in your own office with your door closed, alone, you have to wear a mask. So if you're anywhere else in the office, you wear a mask. And that might change over time as the CDC provides more guidance, but for now, that's what we're doing.
We're close to that with one caveat. So all lawyers, and I think our paralegals, they have their own office space, so they would be able to take off their mask in their own office. And then the question came up, what about people who work more in like a smaller, out a space that doesn't have a closed door? And I think so. The way we're thinking about it is and we have some new plexiglass stuff around some of the reception and some of the legal assistant areas. I think the thinking will be they can take their mask off if they're in their space. But if people are coming down the hall, there's just going to be a courtesy that those people walking around the office will always have a mask on. And they would then put their mask on if someone is coming. Now, again, we're not really in that situation at the moment because we don't really have it, but that's what our policy says. Because I was trying to, lawyers have their own offices. Not all people who work in your law firms have their own private space.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, Sharon, that in our space, because we have a lot of space right now, we actually were able to arrange the space so that everybody will have a closed door space, which is unusual. And that may not be the case with our next lease, but it's a helpful thing right now.
Dave, anything else?
No, we're tracking the same way. I mean, everybody just has to be flexible and be able to sort of pivot quickly because the information and the expert opinions do change. And that's really the main lesson that at least, I think the big takeaway from this is we just all have to be nimble and be prepared to change very quickly depending on, what's required. We did our survey, and I encourage people to do this. It's a very useful exercise because particularly when you get comments back from staff, we had I think we have 65 total employees or 66 total employees, and we got 64 responses to our survey. And this was strictly limited to vaccination. Do you plan on getting vaccinated, or are you vaccinated? And if you're not vaccinated, do you plan on getting vaccinated when you have the opportunity? And most people, the vast majority, say they're either vaccinated or plan to get vaccinated. But the comments were very interesting because some staff would say, I'm going to get vaccinated, but I don't want to work in an office setting if people aren't vaccinated. I feel really uneasy about that, and that's understandable. And so how to deal with that? Oh, and then this is directly to the mask question. Another staff member, I don't know whether this is a staff member or not because it's all anonymous, but somebody responded, even if we all get vaccinated, I really hope we continue to wear masks. And so everybody's sensibilities are a little different, and I imagine we're not going to please everybody, but we're doing the best we can. And again, I think it's all in the messaging. If people know you're doing this for your teammate, and that makes people, I think, more inclined to want to get on board and cooperate.
So one of our questions in the chat box wants to know, are any of you contemplating, revisiting? Do we remain in downtown Baltimore? Each of your firms are in downtown Baltimore, and given that space might be cheaper other places, to rethink that whole model of being in the central business district? Are any of you contemplating that? Sharon's shaking your head no.
We didn't contemplate it. I mean, it didn't take us more than a second. I don't even know if we ever would have considered moving out of Baltimore City. It's our home. It's what we're statewide, we're national, whatever. But I mean, our practice is all over, but we're a Baltimore City based law firm. So no.
And as I mentioned, Judge, we're going through our planning process now, but our thinking is exactly as Sharon described. We're We've always been in downtown Baltimore. We have one office. Well, right now we have about 100 offices, but we have one real office, and that's in downtown Baltimore. And we're committed to our city. That's where our business is. That's where our people are, and that's where our heart is. So we're gonna stay in Baltimore for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine that we're gonna relocate out of Baltimore. And it would be pretty disruptive. We have people who commute in from Anne Arundel County or Howard County or Northern Baltimore, Hartford County, and wherever you decide you want it. If you were to, for example, move to Hunt Valley, it would be an enormous stress on people coming from the Annapolis area and Anne Arundel County. So I can't imagine we're gonna leave we're gonna leave Baltimore City. But there's a real discussion about how much space we actually need and whether our footprint can shrink a little bit as a result of what we've proved to ourselves, that we can operate just fine without a tremendous amount of physical space.
The culture really, I mean, that's the law of the year for a law firm. I mean, productivity has been terrific. People have just, but you can't get the same culture of when you're like, as much as you try, that's what's missing. And that's the beauty of a physical space where people gather and come back. So, that's that balance. Life will be a little different. There'll be more hybriding probably, but I don't think you can make up for the culture that at least we feel like our firms have, without finding that balance.
As a city resident, I'm very happy to hear that all of you are staying in the city, just because it's been disheartening to see what's happening across America, where a lot of people are abandoning the larger cities. The major cities, San Francisco, New York, they're losing 10,000 residents, weekly in some situations. And Baltimore has been through a lot, and it's great to see that you all are still a huge backbone of the vital economy of our city, and we appreciate that. And so one of the quick questions is about testing positive. If one of your employees does test positive, who's been in the office, tell us sort of what are sort of your kind of protocols to deal with that situation. That's a real, possible situation. I know here at the courthouses, throughout the state, we've had clerks who have tested positive, and then they've had to self-quarantine, and then notice is given. There's concerns about privacy and protecting, a person's the HIPAA issues with regard to what you can communicate. So briefly, kind of touch on that if you can. Tom?
Sure. So we've been fortunate so far in that we've had some of our workforce has been affected by COVID, but nobody has been exposed in the office to our knowledge. And it's one of the reasons why we keep careful record of who's in the office and on which days, is so that if that ever did happen, that we would be able to do our own contact tracing to inform others who may have been exposed. If that did happen, and as I said, so far it hasn't, but if it did happen, we have a protocol around a quarantine period. Currently it's 14 days, although I think the CDC has now shortened that, so we could make it a shorter time period. And we may have to close the office for a few days, depending upon the circumstances. But so far we have not happily had to deal with that.
We've had a few situations. It wasn't through the office because people hadn't been there very much, but we have had to notify a few people just in abundance of caution so they could make their own decision about testing. So we've had some of that, and we'll be very open and not necessarily who the person is if it's not necessary, but we have the same policies. I mean, we might have to end up closing for a couple of days, once we're back, if this happens, but we have a protocol also. And I think the quarantining time period is maybe more like 10 days now versus 14. We're just following kind of those recommendations that are out there, and they do change.
Sure. Dave?
Yeah, we had 2 or 3 people test positive. The 2, as I recall, the 2 were never on site, so didn't didn't expose any of their colleagues. One person was on site, and we contacted with her permission. I mean, the person was very cooperative and had no privacy concerns at all. Contacted anybody else who was in the office that day, and there was a very small number of other people, and we told the other people what had happened and to go get tested, and the person who tested positive was stayed away for 2 weeks, and the others were all fine. So it all worked out. I mean, we were I wonder what we would have done if the person wasn't willing to share that information. That would have made it trickier, but we never had to cross that bridge.
Good. Well, folks, we've got 4 minutes remaining. As I said, we do a hard stop at 8:30. Let's, if we can just kind of shift gears a little bit, looking forward. What are some of the highlights looking forward that you expect to achieve the remainder of this year? On a positive note, I'd like to end this session on some of the positive things that have come out of all of this experience, besides the three of your great leadership and the things that you have done and set an example for all firms, whether small, medium, or large across our state. So Dave, let me start back with you, and then we'll work our way around and to Sharon.
Yeah, we need to, I feel like we desperately need to get back together again. We all enjoy each other's company, and we, not having that ability to socialize and it's been tough. And I don't know when the time is going to be right for it, but my thoughts, and Natalie's on the call. I'm sure she'll support me in this. We need to have a big get together and get people together and celebrate and see each other again in the same company, and we're going to make that happen.
Something positive I'll say is, so last summer, 2020, and this summer, we've been able to maintain our law clerk summer experience for people virtually. So we'll have 4 young people coming to 3 law students, 1 master's level person this summer. So I think that's really positive. We did it last year. It was a little shorter than our normal summer. Maybe it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks instead of 10. But we're excited. We have some, rising stars coming to join us, and I think that's a great positive.
Fantastic. Tom, how about your firm?
Yeah, same. So we have a crab feast that's scheduled at the end of August, and we're going to hopefully keep that date. It's going to be in a state park, and we'll all get together then.
Nice.
In some form. It may mean that people are just picking up their food and leaving, but I hope that we'll be able to get together and have a great party in the firm. And like Sharon, and I know Dave, you've done this too, we've kept our summer program. We had a shortened one last year. This year, we're going to have a full program with a full complement of summer associates. So that's always fun to have, the young people come into the office here by Zoom mostly, but that'll just add some energy to the office. And I would say, just another positive is, as we come out of this pandemic and we look back next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I think we'll all feel good about what we've done in our organizations, and the people in the organizations will feel good about what they did to bring all of us together through it. I know our firm, many of the people who went through the Great Recession 10 years ago in our firm, they feel that way about that time, that we navigated that difficulty without laying off any people, tightening our belts together, staying together. And this experience is similar. And I think we'll look back and feel like we became stronger as individuals and as a group as a result of it.
That's wonderful. Again, I want to thank the 3 of you for your time today, your leadership, and really sharing with us today sort of the experience you've gone through. I think we can all pick something up that we've learned from the experiences. And as you said, Tom and Sharon and Dave, that bringing us back together at some point, very near future in some way, and making sure that we have that personal interrelationship and contact is critical. And each of you clearly care about your employees, care about your practices, your firms, and more importantly, with one another and share your experiences not just to within your firms, but to really firms across our state. And so for that, I really want to thank the three of you for that leadership. We look forward to having the managing partners working group as a committee of the Maryland State Bar Association. Remind everyone about our next coffee chat on May 5th with our chief judges. Our annual meeting and legal summit registration is open June 9th to the 12th. And we're culminating with the introduction of our new president, which will be Natalie McSherry, who's on our call today. I look forward to turning over our presidency to Natalie. I know she's going to do a phenomenal job, and I hope you all join us as we celebrate Natalie and the 125th year of the Maryland State Bar Association. I hope everyone has a great day, and look forward to seeing everyone soon. Take care. Thank you again.
Oh.
Thank you, Judge.